Are you ready to eliminate your credit card processing fees? Visit www.pairpayments.com and use code JAKE for a $250 Visa gift card when you join today.
This is the Inspection Pros Podcast, where we break down everything you need to know to grow a successful home inspection company. Join host Jake as we get insider knowledge from the industry's best on how to take your business to the next level.
Welcome back to the Inspection Pros Podcast, your favorite business building podcast for the home inspection industry. Today, Jay and I are going to be discussing the B drive. I have Jay Hawreluk joining us once again from AcuMax to discuss the B drive. Last time we talked, we discussed the A drive. Jay, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you again, Jake.
All right. So just in case anyone missed the last episode that we did with you, and there are some other episodes where we discussed AcuMax as a whole and everything you can do with your software and with your program. But Jay, what do people need to know before we hop into the B drive if someone hasn't listened to anything else?
Well, what we want to recap quickly is what does the AcuMax Index measure? We are considered a personality assessment, but we're not a personality assessment. And let me explain why. All personality assessments are based in the social sciences, the observable behavior of people. Behavior changes over time due to a lot of external elements, starts with upbringing and then education, age of maturity, responsibilities, change people's behavior. The difference with AcuMax is we measure innate mental wiring. Wiring occurs in the 18 to 24 month period after any human being on the planet is born. It's static. It stays with you your entire lifetime. So it's a deep dive into an individual. Now, during this formative time of 18 to 24 months, there's millions of neural pathways formed that control all sorts of functions from the brain and the body. We measure for the A, the B, the C, and the D, how they pertain to business and relationships. And business is just relationships. So, the A drive is idea flow, how I value ideas, how I get engaged in ideas. The B drive that we're going to talk about today is communication. And tune in for the C and the D to find out what they are. So, a little bit of advanced marketing for you there, Jake.
Absolutely. So as Jay just alluded to, because I love getting into AcuMax and everything Jay has fleshed out here for us, I want to really get into each of these drives. So we're going to do an episode for A, B, C, and D drives so that you can really understand the inner workings of your teams at a deeper level. So, Jay, without further ado, let's hop into the B drive. What is the B drive? What do we need to know about the B drive?
Well, we simply call the B drive communication. Everybody talks about the importance of communication. As human beings, we all talk, we all think. Yes, you can communicate sending an email, a text, a call on the phone, but real communication is having the person to be able to really buy in to ideas, plans of action. That is what real communication is. It's not so much just to say something to somebody, it's how they buy in. And so B, being the communication channel, it's the buy-in channel. It tells us how people truly process thought, because no person will ever buy into anything, be it in an organization, in a relationship, unless they have time to completely process the thought. So there's two ways of doing it. There are internal thought processors, they talk and think, and there are external thought processors, they talk and think. But how do you know the difference? Internal thought processors are individuals who listen to everything that goes on in their environment. Then their brain kind of sorts through what's important, what's the meat, what's not important, and then analyzes the net, and then that's where they will make a decision. Are they in or are they out? External thought processors are just the opposite. They talk they think. The difference is they do it verbally. So what it does is it can create oftentimes confusions in how people process thought. So for example, a verbal thought processor, what we call high in the B as a matter of fact, high Bs are more stream of consciousness. So this is what will happen. Well, I'm thinking about turning right, but there's some potholes and positives. Maybe I'm going to turn left and there's some positives. But you know what? Maybe we should just go straight ahead because, I can see it's probably a safer route. And as we're verbalizing the high B, external thought processors, we're crystallizing ideas, plans of action, and how we want to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then we buy in. The issue is others around us may get confused. Well, you talked about going right, you talked about going left, you talked about going straight. What is it? Internal thought processors, they listen, take the information in, then need some time to absorb it all. The issue is they oftentimes don't respond until they've gone through the thought process.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what happens. A high B and a low B. High B says, I'm going to turn right, left, go straight. Low B's left confused. Well, what are you going to do? The high B shoots an idea at the low B, and the low B stares blankly back at them. The high B gets frustrated, starts to repeat themselves. Mm-hmm. And when they start to repeat themselves, guess what they do? They actually impede the low B from being able to think.
Okay.
This goes on all the time. This is actually the easiest drive to spot. All right. Mm-hmm. But remember, everybody thinks, everybody talks. Now, high Bs, what I recommend is when you're going to have a verbal, session. Actually, one of my clients named it the best. He goes on a verbal rant. And he'll say, okay, team, I'm going on a verbal rant. And he'll talk about right, left, up, down, whatever. But at the end of it, he summarizes. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the opportunity to let me verbally rant. I've decided after kind of going through this that turning left is the best way to go. Mm-hmm. His team is low B. So then he says, why don't you think about it, kick it around, and we'll circle back on this item. That creates the buy-in for the low B, and it allows them to ask better questions. Let's talk about a meeting in a company. In a company meeting, high Bs, just by our nature, we can verbalize at the drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. If the agenda is a bunch of items, but something new comes up, we're glad to verbalize about that.
Yeah.
Low Bs aren't as comfortable. Now, on things that a low B knows cold, if I say, hey, how do you do this? How do you operate this machine? Bang, bang, bang. But it's normally in planning meetings, discussions of moving forward, issues that occur in organizations. So what we recommend from a meeting perspective, put an agenda out in advance. Mm-hmm. It allows low Bs to think about it and prepare their questions so they come prepared for the meeting. This oftentimes eliminates the meeting after the meeting. We've all experienced this. Go in, have a meeting. Next day, or maybe a couple hours later, somebody walks in and says, I was thinking about that meeting, and I'm not so sure that we should do this, or this. So it helps to eliminate the meeting after the meeting. The second thing is if something new comes up at that meeting, put it on the parking lot. Mm-hmm. Make it an agenda item for the next time. Now, if it's urgent, which can happen, you can be in a meeting, something big could happen. If it's urgent, talk about the issue and give the low Bs just a little bit of time to process. It may not be much, just so that you have their full buy-in, they're prepared to ask the best questions, and then the team is unified at the end of the meeting. So technique, if you know that you're a high B, a verbal thinker, if you talk to somebody and ask them a question and get the blank stare, don't say anything.
Yeah.
Now, I know sometimes that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
If you don't like the dead air, make up your own. Hey, Jake, do you need a minute to think about this? All right. Low Bs, you're an internal thought processor. If somebody starts repeating themselves when they ask a question, here's the easy thing to do. You know what? Just give me a minute to think about it. Can I kick that around? That's a new point. Because remember, no one will ever completely buy in if their communication channel is not completely satisfied.
Yeah.
Low B's, time to think about it. High B's, time to verbalize it. And this goes on all the time. You have a meeting, something new comes up, the high B's verbalize it, low B's haven't totally bought in or had the ability to really formulate and ask their questions. So what it creates is more people clutter. It slows the process down. One is not better than the other. It just is. But knowing who you are can really help in those arenas.
Yeah.
So again, to recap, for business,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So it really does sound like you're by understanding not only yourself but the makeup of your team and how they think and process thought. You're really setting yourself up you're setting your company and yourself up for success if you can play to everyone's strengths, right?
Well, absolutely, because the number one thing that everyone wants is employees to be engaged, self-engaged, bought into the company and the company's missions. And this is a great way because oftentimes this is kind of a very low B thing. Go to a meeting, a couple hours after the meeting's over, or maybe sooner, some ideas pop into their head and they go, why didn't I say that in the meeting? Well, those could be great ideas, great contributions. So you want to make sure that everybody is involved. So the simple step, number one, have an agenda. If anything changes during that agenda, if possible, put it on the parking lot. If not, it's important, you have to take care of it right away. Then give everybody time to think. Those of you that are high Bs, give low Bs time to think. Make up your own response if you don't get one. Low Bs, what the high B wants is acknowledgement of their thought. They want a response. So all you say is, hey, I hear you, let me kick it around. Based upon the low B's agenda, they may kick it around for 2 or 3 minutes, but they may be busy with other things, maybe a couple hours. They'll let you know. This allows good idea flow, good contribution, and most importantly, the buy-in of everybody on the team.
Of course. And so, Jay, I did cut you off right before you were going to give us a little recap. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a moment to hear a word from our sponsor, Pair Payments, and then we'll be right back with a recap from Jay and some questions to get a little bit deeper into the B Drive. All right, we'll be right back.
So we saved well over $250K.
Just this quarter, we have saved about $30,000 in credit card fees.
Probably over $1,000 a month at least.
Over $150,000 this year alone.
$180,000 the first year we worked with them, and it's growing every single year.
Thank you, Pair Payments.
Thank you, Pair.
I would recommend them to anyone.
Yeah, just wish I would have done it sooner.
All right, and we are back with Jay Hawreluk from AcuMax. So, Jay, right before the break, you had mentioned a recap. So let's do a quick recap of everything we just talked about, and then let's hop into some questions.
The first thing to remember, everybody talks, everybody thinks. That's what human beings are. Communication is truly the ability to buy in, think issues through, and create very good questions, feedback, and complete buy-in. High B's, verbal thinkers, buy in verbally. They'll talk it through. As we're verbalizing, we oftentimes generate ideas, plans of action, and thought. Low B's think and talk, but their brain works a little differently. They take in everything in their environment, sift it down to the meat, and then think about it. If a high B can't verbalize it, they'll never buy in. If a low B can't internalize it, they'll never buy in. The key in a company is have an agenda in the meeting in advance so low Bs know what to expect. They can properly prepare their thoughts and questions. If things change at the meeting, if possible, put it on a parking lot, or if it's an emergency, which sometimes happens, discuss the emergency and give those low Bs a little time to think it through. And it might be something this simple. Hey, this came up, gang. Do we have a little bit of time? Yeah, can we just take a quick 10-minute break just to process it so that people, especially the low Bs, can come back with questions or make sure they've truly thought it through to buy in to the issue. So there's your little recap.
So
take those notes.
Yeah, and so this brings some questions up right away for me. We've talked about how to structure this best for success for your team, how to really get the best out of people by kind of letting them flex the way they process their thought, letting them do it the way that it would be more conducive to their success and production. So where are some of the breakdowns here? Just based off my initial thoughts, I'm seeing that in a lot of teams there could be breakdowns of just the general consensus being that, hey, and this is all misconception, right? That, hey, the external thought processors are flip-flopping too much, or they are all over the place. They're not really focusing on enough. And then a breakdown for the internal thought processors is maybe the misconception that they're not fully engaged or not paying attention. Is that something you see on both of those fronts?
You nailed it. That's exactly it. You nailed it. It's perception.
Mm-hmm.
It's perception. And so understanding, and obviously the AcuMax provides clarity on who is whom. But if you're a verbal thought processor, take my client's advice. By the way, when I hear good stuff from a client, I always ask them if I can borrow it. And so, hey, I'm going to go on a high B rant. I'm going to go on a verbal rant. This helps me clarify my thoughts and really buy into things. Or a low B, hey, you know what? Just let me have a little bit of time to kind of absorb it and think about it. Actually, a real good technique, if it's possible to do, is have the meeting at the end of the day. A lot of companies have them in the beginning of the day, and I understand that. But if you can have a quick recap at the end of the day, this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow morning. That gives the low Bs time to think about it, be totally bought in for a quick meeting in the morning. It all depends on what your organization is. But you're right, perceptions. And sometimes it's just best to ask. Are you more internal? Do you want to think it through before you respond? Or do you do best when you're verbalizing? Sometimes just that simple question creates a lot of clarity in an organization.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that just being on the same playing field, having the same understanding of everyone in the team probably helps a lot with the dynamic if you're on the same page. If you've done the AcuMax Index and you understand what's going on with everyone, I'm sure that gives you a lot of clarity. But a question I have is, what do you do with the uninitiated? Are there other breakdowns that happen in the uninitiated? If there are people who haven't been aware of AcuMax or completed the AcuMax, are there other breakdowns you see that understanding of the B drive could help?
Well, absolutely, because oftentimes in meetings, high Bs will be verbal. Well, you make a good point here, Jake. Let's talk it through. And, so we'll be to contribute. If you have a lot of high B on a team, they may step on each other. One may not finish before the other one starts, which can create some clutter. With low Bs are oftentimes get real confused with what the high B is talking about. And depending on the intensity of the internal factor of the low B may think about it, but may not necessarily say it. So depending on the dynamics of the group, and we've been into organizations based upon, the type of organization where the team is predominantly high B or the team is predominantly low B. In a predominantly high B team, lots of verbalization, stepping on others. In a predominantly low B team, a lot of internal thought without necessarily communicating that thought to others.
So,
Great.
Question for you, Jay, on this. If someone's now, listening to these podcasts, aware of AcuMax and the stuff you're talking about with the A drive and the B drive, and they're like, all right, this is amazing. I want to hear about all the drives, but how do I build my team to kind of maximize what I now know? What would you say is there an optimal team build formula, or is there some way to kind of, if you're building out a team from scratch, is there something to look for in the makeup of that team? Should you mix A and B? Does it matter?
It really depends a lot on the industry. Manufacturing, engineering by its nature is very analytical and heads down, and oftentimes has a lot of low B in it. Sales-driven organizations or customer service-driven, people interaction may have a lot of higher B in it. So it really kind of depends. The
Okay.
key is knowing. And so what's the best way to know? Take the AcuMax for yourself. And if you're interested, then move forward and we'll help you in understanding your team, because one of the key things that all business owners suffer from is not enough time.
Yeah.
So if we can increase the efficiency of meetings and reduce people clutter, it actually creates not only more buy-in for the individuals, but it creates a more productive organization as well.
Absolutely. So it sounds like there's not an ideal construction or makeup of a team, that you just kind of can get the most out of the cards you're dealt, right? With an understanding of this.
Yeah, a lot depends again on the industry, the position. So, for example, a lot of companies, the more client facing, the customer facing, they're going to be more high B. The more administrative individuals, oftentimes technicians, are going to be lower B. So it depends on the organization. The key is knowing and then being able to apply those concepts consistently to improve ideation, buy-in, and reduce people clutter.
Have you ever seen people in an organization where they're really low B, but they're in a position that being high B would be better? Do you see that at all, where people are not in the right roles, and how would you respond to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we see that frequently. We'll see, let's say, somebody that's technically very good in their role, and then they're promoted to a managerial or a supervisory position. They're low B, they're technically sound. So what do they need to do? Well, they need to be agendas for meetings, understand that high Bs need to verbalize. So that person that sometimes comes into your office or walks up to you and says, hey, I need to talk to you about something, is generating thought. So the key thing that managers and supervisors can do, not only besides being good coaches, but facilitate effective communication by understanding this point. That's critical.
So in that track or that train of thought, are there exercises that you can do to like correct issues or to strengthen someone's not understanding of it, but basically what I'm trying to get at here is, if someone is a low B and they're moved into that supervisory or managerial role, and they have to be more of if they're in a low B and they have to be more of a high B for the role, are there exercises you can use to kind of flex that muscle to get them communicating in different ways?
Absolutely. The first thing is knowing who you are. And then, like with low Bs, the biggest coaching with low Bs in a quick scenario like this is to give others response. Oftentimes, somebody will walk up to the low B manager. Now, again, if it's something they know cold, hey, how do I operate this piece of equipment? But if something requires thought, hey, we got an interesting problem here, we got a challenge, the number one thing they can do is acknowledge the thought. You know what? You make a real good point, Jake. I need a few minutes to kick this around, organize my thoughts, to give you the best answer I can. That's just, and you can use variations. Let me noodle on it, let me kick it around, let me problem solve on it a little bit, so you don't sound like a broken record. So that is a critical aspect. High B supervisors, though, you also have to do some things for your low B individuals. So if you find yourself asking a question of somebody and getting what we call the blank processing stare is there's no verbalization, but the wheels are turning. When you get that going, then what you want to do in those particular situations is say, hey, do you need a few minutes to kick that around before you get back with me? Those are the two techniques that I would really recommend, just from a generic perspective.
Absolutely, and that sounds great. So just because I don't want to forget to mention this, again, we mentioned it in the last episode we did with Jay and the one prior to that, but Jay has been very kind and has opened up complimentary AcuMax indexes for listeners of this podcast. So thank you for that, Jay. And I'm just going to drop that in here real quick. And it will be in the description as well. That will be on the podcast apps and on YouTube. But if you text Jake, Jake, text Jake to 218-517-7985. Again, that's 218-517-7985. you can take a complimentary AcuMax Index, and I highly recommend you do it because, I mean, how could you miss it? After talking about this with Jay at length, I've come to understand that this is something that you can use to take your business to the next level. No matter where you are, you can deepen the understanding you have of yourself, your team members, and the makeup of your organization as a whole. So thank you for that, Jay. I really appreciate that, and take Jay up on that fantastic offer.
Thank you very much, Jake. Well, you've learned in your own organization. You've got some high B and you've got some low B. And so just understanding that really just it takes away frustrations that people have, because we all view the world through our own lens. So it takes away some of those frustrations, but it also improves that interaction. And more importantly, the input and buy-in of those around you.
Absolutely. And I have seen it myself, as I'm sure most people who are doing podcasts are. I know myself, I am a high B. And as a high B, you can come to expect, I know you've covered this, but just my own experience, you can come to expect everyone to think the same way. And so you sit there and you're like, hey, low Bs, I need an answer. What's your thought on this? And it really does help me understand that sometimes, I just need to give them room to think and let that idea breathe in their head so that they can come to me with their formulated, fully evolved thought instead of forcing them to think the way I do, which is out loud and crystallizing ideas through discussion and dialogue.
Absolutely. Great recap, Jake. Great recap.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Jay. Is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap up this episode on the B Drive?
I think the biggest thing is know who you are and practice to better interact with the people that are opposite of you. And that will improve communication in your organization.
All right. So, Jay, thank you so much for today. What is next? What are we discussing in the next episode?
Next one is going to be the C Drive. And we call the C Drive patience. But what it covers is work style, speed of decision making, pressure acceptance. So understanding that drive, that's one of the most complicated of the 4 drives, and because it covers so much with an individual. So that ought to be a fun one.
I'm sure that will be a blast of an episode, and I cannot wait to get that one out soon. So that'll be a blast. Tune in for that one, and you will get to know patience, the C Drive. So thank you very much, Jay.
You cannot wait, Jake, because you're an impatient guy by nature.
Yes. Jay knows all of my drives, and yes, that is true. I am an impatient guy by nature, so you can come to expect that episode to come out pretty quickly. I'm sure we'll get that one on the schedule as soon as possible and pump that one out to our listeners. Who the feedback I've gotten so far is that the audience is loving these drive podcasts, so I cannot wait to get into the C Drive next.
Sounds good. I look forward to it. I enjoy doing these podcasts with you, Jake.
Oh, my pleasure. I enjoy them as well, and we will see you back as soon as possible for that next episode. So thank you very much, Jay. I appreciate you coming on again.
My pleasure.
All right, so thank you as well to the audience. Much appreciated. If you've listened this far, please like, subscribe, rate and review the podcast. That'll help us get seen by more people. And as always, the most important thing you could do to give us a hand, if you like this podcast, please share it with someone that you know that this could help them grow their own business. If you know someone out there in your industry, maybe even in your own market, that you'd like to help see or help grow their business, you'd like to see them improve and evolve as they grow, pass on this podcast. See if it's something that they can learn from, because we have fantastic experts like Jay on this podcast every week. So like, subscribe, share, rate, and review, and we will see you next week. And as always, we have a fantastic roster of guests coming, so stay tuned to see what else we have coming in the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much, Jay. Thank you to the audience, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks for listening to the Inspection Pros Podcast. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss our next episode. This episode was produced by Jake Aronson. This has been a Pair Payments production.